My name is Joel Garrison. I'm a hyper curious learner and, like everyone, a lover of the sense of sight. I'm very delighted to host this podcast today dedicated to sight on behalf of the Internet of Senses Institute. Today, we are very excited to speak with Samantha G. Wolfe. Sam is no stranger to the Internet of Senses Institute. In fact, she's one of our most cherished community members. Sam is the founder of PitchFWD, an emerging tech consultancy that works with many of the world's most innovative companies on branding, marketing, and business strategies. Sam holds a Master of Business Administration from the New York University Stern School of Business and teaches courses she created and developed as an adjunct professor at the New York University Steinhardt. Sam, again, we're very excited to catch up with you today, not just because you're such a beloved member of our community, but it's big time for you. You just released a new book. I was able to preview that book. It is really packed full of amazing information. And we're just so fortunate to catch up with you today. Of course, the name of the book is Metaverse, See Beyond the Hype, co-written with Louis Bravo Martins. Before we learn more about your new book, would you tell us more about yourself and give us an introduction to how you developed your passion for the sense of sight?
Well, thanks for having me, Joel. I'm really happy to be here. In terms of me, I mean, you gave a little bit from the academic side, and honestly, I sort of love innovation. I've realized that I love innovation and I love the people who work in it, like the innovators and early adopters, and have just sort of dove in head first into the emerging tech space. I actually was in the TV industry for a while. So speaking of sight, I mean, that's what TV is sort of almost all about. And had an experience with 360 video at Tribeca years and years ago and went, what is this? This is how I feel like television is, just sort of being surrounded by a story. And so I decided to just learn as much as I could about the technology, follow it as it evolves, sort of ride the wave of innovation. And the more that I learned about it, the more that I studied it, the more I wanted to teach other people about it, explain it to other people, help different companies be able to explain what they do and what's valuable about what they do. And then everything sort of evolved from there. And then this idea of all the technologies, all these emerging technologies coming together in sort of a different way to interact with the world and experience the world just became extremely fascinating to me. And that's sort of how studying and understanding this future metaverse, whether it is called that or not, but that's how it came to be.
Wow, thanks for that introduction. That's a great way to encapsulate the book. I mean, it really is the combination of so many efforts coming together for one, mega technology that is going to be at the center of so many things in the future. I can, after reading the book, tell you it is a one-stop shop, all-incomprehensive introduction and overview of the metaverse. So it's really fascinating book. Would you tell us some of the, staying with the topic of the sense of sight, tell us some of the more interesting things about the sense of sight and the metaverse?
Well, in general, I do like to think that I look at the metaverse through the lens. It's sort of my bad joke, but it's like the lens of augmented reality and virtual reality, because that's sort of where my background is. And then I say, how would somebody experience, whether it be a consumer or enterprise employee, customer, whatever, how are they going to experience this future of technology? And most of it is through the sense of sight. I mean, there's a lot of, I actually like talking about all the senses in my classes and trying to sort of understand them, but the primary one is sight. It's sort of what are you seeing, and either what you're seeing is completely virtual, which is what, you know, a lot of people, when they think of the metaverse, they might think of like, oh, well, it's virtual reality, and it's not just that. But that is sort of that virtual world. Many people also think of it as only maybe the virtual world of gaming, which is again sort of sight, even though it's not just that, it's not just only that, or augmented reality, of which we've only sort of begun to see the potential of, at least on a consumer standpoint, with filters and sort of experiencing those, whether it be, you could be sort of your Zoom filter or a Snapchat filter, but on the enterprise side, starting to see a little bit more of an understanding of what it means if you go out into the world and everything that you see can be identified with information in every one that you see, that you can learn more information about them. It brings up a lot of potential exciting things, and it also brings up a lot of potential scary things, which we address both in the book. But the way that we see the world in general will change, and that, I think that's why I you know, normally when I write things or I talk about things, I try to do it in a sort of non-technical way, because I do think that this is going to impact everyone in different kinds of ways, but you have to sort of understand it in order to make decisions about it. You can't sort of assume the people that are the ones that are coding it, although I love them, I love my developers and coders and creators, but you can't assume that that's going to be the only group of people out there that will that this will influence or impact. That the way that everybody interacts in the world is going to shift, and you need to understand it in order to get ready for it.
Yeah, I mean, it really is a book for all different learners, regardless of how much they may know about the metaverse. There's something in the book that, you know, even the greatest expert will probably look at and say, wow, I didn't know that. I'm glad I could add that to our toolkit.
I tried. I mean, the one thing that I found over and over is that a lot of people could be an expert in a particular area or a particular thing. And one of the things that I like to do is be that, I guess you call the Jane of all trades, like the jack of all trades of okay, well, you can understand a particular industry application, but you probably don't have, in one chapter, which for me was chapter 8, you know, over 20 different industry applications of it, and over 60 experts in those particular areas to talk about it. It was just sort of like in one place. So it is as easy a read as you can have for that much information, and that was sort of our goal.
It really is. I mean, you did a phenomenal job introducing a lot of complex terms, you know, concepts in a very easy to understand, readable fashion. But for those people out there that are, you know, kind of, you know, novice, you know, being introduced to this future of ours, let's talk about some of the basic terms. You've mentioned a couple of them that I wanted to kind of explain a little deeper, and that is the difference between the augmented reality versus virtual reality.
Sure, and this is, thank you for saying about the easier to explain. That's you know, everybody has their superpowers, and that I can do. Like that is sort of mine. Of like,
that is a real talent,
the most
advanced.
You want, yeah, get me the most advanced technology out there and let me figure out like how to explain it and how to explain who is the customers and where does it go. Like I actually go out and actively try to find it, because to me it's a puzzle that's fun to get other people to explain, but or understand and then use and apply. But so augmented reality for virtual reality. Virtual reality, the way you know, to think about it sort of in general is, it's, you know, when you put those headsets on your face, like when you're like, I'm about to look really silly and I'm going to put this thing on my face, because what it does is it sort of gives you like a digital world that you're in and you're
It's like a
looking
new
around
world.
and
Yeah.
experiencing. And so the thing about it that I like to find the difference of sometimes for people who are like, oh, I've tried it, I did a roller coaster and got sick, and forget it. Like, no, 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 no. The only way that you sort of know that you're in like good virtual reality is if you really feel like you're there, that there's that sense of presence and understanding. So what that is that there's actually technology that does a lot of tracking on your body and your movements, and that if it is tracked appropriately, if it's a sort of a good, then when you move up and down and around, it will adapt and change. So if you bend your knees, the the graphics sort of make it look like you feel like you bent your knees in that particular environment. If you walk forward, it follows you where you're walking forward. It's not sort of the equivalent of like having a TV on your face or having, you do feel like you move through it. Inside joke for the company, my company name calling PitchFWD is like, these are two of the 6 degrees of freedom, pitch and forward. It's a whole other thing that nobody will get except for me and those who are listening. Augmented reality is different. Now, augmented reality is you're actually looking at the world and you're experiencing the world, but there's graphics on top of it. And so sometimes there's graphics on top of it, like on your face with like a Snapchat filter, and you have, hearts coming out of your head or whatever it is. Or it's, when, having, as I said, like the Zoom filter in the back, like you are on a beach instead of just in the middle of New York City. Like people think that you're somewhere else. Where when it comes to sort of a business application of it, it could be that you're putting on glasses, which they love to use acronyms, HMDs, a head mounted display, HMD, and you're going around maybe like a shop floor or whatever, and you want to understand what the different machines are or what's going on, that you can do that sort of in real time and see it. People who are designing cars, and there are multiple people that need to work together, they can look at almost what looks like a Tony Stark, like Marvel car design, and you feel like people are there, but you can actually see the real world too. The trick is about the experiencing of the metaverse in the way that I sometimes, in a very, very simple way, try to think of as if you put both of those together. Like if you choose that, I'm going to go in this virtual world that I can walk around, experience, or I can go in this sort of augmented, real world, and how they're interconnected. That's even in the most simplest of simple ways that might upset some people who work in the industry to hear it simplified to that degree. But really, that's sort of how I would say like a normal person would experience that sort of future metaverse world. And if you think about it, like, people are like, oh, it's the future of the internet, it's whatever it is, that it's that dimensionalization of it, they be able to move through it and interact with it, that makes it different. And why, even if people have said, there's always hype about whatever technology out there, it was like that future interactivity and multidimensional aspect of things is what's coming. It is part of, like, AI is a huge part of it. And so if you hear all the stuff about it, like AI is going to have to help power those how can you walk around, like how can millions and billions of people walk around in an augmented reality based world? You need AI to help with that. You need AI to help with interactions with virtual humans, which is a whole other topic I have in a different class. But all of that, it sort of just changes the way that you interact. And again, through that, to pull it back to augmented reality or virtual reality, lens computer interaction in whatever way you so choose.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I love most about the book is you sometimes read articles and hear people talk, and they kind of paint 2 different versions of the future. One is a world where we live in augmented reality, and the other is one where we live in virtual, or at least we visit virtual reality. But your book, makes the argument that there's, we hear this buzzword convergence, and your work kind of brought it together for me that it's not one or the other. It's really all of the above, and it's all coming together.
Yeah.
So that was a
And
really
we don't
amazing.
know. I mean, that's the thing that's sort of funny is the fact that I feel like the people who know the most about these technologies are the most willing to admit that we don't know everything. Like that, if there's like this, I wish I remembered the term, but it was basically like the people who are just learning are maybe a little bit nervous about it. The people who are learning a little bit more, like, I know everything. Like, I know everything, and they tell you that they know everything. And then the people who actually do know the most are like, we're still figuring it out. And for some reason, to be out there and saying, like, I know a ton about emerging technology, but we're still figuring out, sometimes it's controversial that people like to know exactly. And I say in the book, like, we know the individual technologies. We know some of them where there's like a combination of 2 or 3 coming together, and that's okay. But when it's all of these emerging technologies that are all coming together, we don't know yet. I like to use the example of, there's a person who used to come to my marketing emerging tech class, and he came multiple times, and he worked on like the early Apple launches and like the Apple iPhone launches. And he's like, we didn't know that there would be an app store. And I'm like, think about how much at least the App Store and the Apple, like how that changes our lives. And when they launched it, they didn't know that. And then the people who launched, the people who launched the internet didn't realize there was going to be social media, like as an entire industry in and of itself. So there's a certain amount that we do know when it comes to different technologies, but there's still a certain amount that we have to figure out and how they fit together and the way they fit together. And that's sort of the exciting, fun part. And we were talking earlier that I was like, things are always changing and shifting. And right now, with AI, everything's shifting faster than anyone anticipated, even the people within emerging tech. So that makes all of us in the same boat of like, we don't know, but we're figuring it out.
Yeah, that's one of the most amazing things about this concept of convergence is that it's not just the moving of everything that we know about into something that looks like what we've had in the past. That's just a bunch of mixes of the past, but it's actually the ability to create new and things that you don't foresee. That's really the true power of convergence.
Yeah, no, and I like looking a little bit in the past because we can learn from it. It's like that's the thing I think happens a lot of times is when you're talking about new and emerging technology. Yes, okay, augmented reality, virtual reality, future metaverse, whatever is going to change the way that we interact with the world in a different way. But you can still look at older technologies. You can still look at the adoption of older technologies and say, okay, how can I extrapolate what that means and where that will go? And I think that sort of, you forget, like you can talk about just what happened before. Remember, I was in it, I was like, I need to research like what happened with the dark web. Like, how did it come to be? Like, what was it? What was going on? And how did and just to go like, okay, could there be the equivalent? Like, what is the equivalent? And like, how could we, prepare for it? Whatever, there's going to be bad actors in all senses. And so that's where I don't like to sort of go in with like, it's going to be amazing or it's going to be terrible. I want to go in with like, what is it really going to be? And that you can learn from the past a little bit. You can go, okay, well, people like to do this kind of thing. And then if we added this technology on top of it, then this could happen for good. This could happen for bad. Now we can make a decision. I mean, the problem is that, like, there's a lot of technology that we can't say, oh, this in 5 years and 10 years, but there's some. And so you just have to go in with open eyes and look at it, just go in and go like, I'm gonna ride the wave. That's what I said to my students. Like, today we just gonna figure it out And I think that if you're open to it, you can get into the industry, you can play with the technology, you can meet the people, and that's what I like to try to do. And the book is sort of an extension of that, but I do that in anytime I'll talk on a podcast, anytime I'll,
Yeah.
speak at an event or whatever, I get sort of excited and I'm like, ooh, I'm going to teach this person a little something. They'll be able to go have that moment of like, wait a second, I think I get it now enough to ask you questions. And I'm like, yes, perfect.
Yeah. Those responses, there's so much to unpack. Before we move forward and unpack some of that, I did want to go back to one term that I learned from your book and get you to talk about it a little bit more. And that's this term of diminished reality.
This is just this concept of the idea of being able to sort of almost like erase what you see. And there's examples in sci-fi of when this happened, but it actually, I was doing some research I've taught 4 original classes over the past 3 years at NYU. So I did a business of AR and VR, marketing of emerging tech, avatars and virtual beings, and a business of the metaverse class.
And these are all classes that you created, right?
They're all classes that I created. Yes.
Wow.
All of them. I've had over like 150 guests and all this sort of thing. It's really sort of a fun side hustle. Of just, I get to.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
It's fun. And it's, but what I have to do is, because it's emerging tech, is that for every time I teach the class, I have to go and like look around and say like, what's going on? Like what's happening? Somebody said, that sounds exhausting. And I'm like, it is, but it's also great. And so I looked at like, an example came up of diminished reality actually when I was doing it, that IKEA's new app, you can erase like where your couch is when you use the app, so you can put in their couch and see what it looks like. So that erasing of the couch when you look at your room through your phone or their app is diminished reality. It is like removing of things that are actually physically there, but through your screen they sort of are gone. And so there are that sort of dystopian visions of like, you walk around and you're like, I don't want to see this anymore, so I'm going to get rid of it. And in theory that could happen. I mean, I think there's an entire Black Mirror episode where somebody was like, I don't want to see my ex-girlfriend or whatever, and like she's like gone from his life. And so it could go to that extreme theoretically if you do facial recognition and then diminished reality on it. But I think that probably in the near term it's much more like the IKEA, like, let's erase the couch so we can put the couch in there, which makes a ton of sense for if you want to decorate your house or your apartment or whatever, that how can you decorate it without understanding what it looks like without it, or what it would look like with other things in it. And that object recognition, which is good for putting things into your space from an augmented reality, can also help you identify and use AI again to remove, because the AI is going like, what does it look like behind the couch, on the floor, on the wall, and make sort of guesses using that technology to do that. And so I do like the term diminished reality. I mean, we don't need another, like, it's DR with AR and VR, like, please no, like no more acronyms. I really do think that technologists like create new acronyms just to make it more difficult. But I think it'll be interesting to see, I think, more and more as augmented reality, as computer vision, as all this can take in the world and identify it. And as AI gets more, infiltrates even more, that there will be the opportunity to remove things. And that concept and that idea is diminished reality. Yeah,
it's so interesting. I just read an article a day or two ago, and it was XR. So before I even
XR is a whole other. XR sort of is everything. XR is like extended reality.
And I had to go and read about and figure out what XR was.
XR is just all of it. It's AR and VR, it's combined, it's cross reality, extended reality, all of it. And then if you also want to confuse yourself even more, there's a mixed reality, which is what people talk about, which is like much more of a Microsoft term. To me, rightly or wrongly, I think of it as it's AR, but it's a little bit more interactive. When they talk about it, they're discussing it, but really AR should be interactive. So it's and they'll say it's on the spectrum between AR on one side, VR on the other side, mixed reality in the middle. This is where people in the emerging tech industry get in their own way in terms of creating lots and lots of terms. And so sometimes I do like to go in there and just be like, let me try to explain it. And even, honestly, if it's not perfect, but it gets you far enough to understand it so that you're not so much worried about the term, but you understand the concept, which having so many terms is hard to understand the concept. But if you get to the point of concept, again, you can make decisions or brainstorm or think about what's possible. Or even if you're trying to hire a company to do something for you, that you're able to have the questions, the back and forth, as opposed to having somebody say, well, I'm in technology and I know what I'm doing. Let me tell you, company, what to do. Instead, the executive on the other side to be like, well, wait a second. Can you do this? Have you thought of this? Could we ever do this? What if we brought in these other technologies? Have you heard of it? Like, it's just more of an easy back and forth kind of conversation, as opposed to like, I don't know any of these acronyms. Like, hey, other person who works in tech in the company, like, you decide. Like, I want it to be a part. It's going to be a part of everybody's lives. So I want everybody to be able to have an understanding and be able to make the choices that are right for them.
Yeah. And in a few years, all of these terms, if they last,
they might not.
Yeah. But if they do, they'll be just a part of our new normal daily conversations,
I mean, I think that's what they say, that a lot of teenagers use augmented reality, but have no idea what the term is. A lot of people use it, and they just don't know. They're like, oh, it's just the thing when I can see and interact with a graphic. Like, it's like, yeah, that's what it is.
But the bottom line is the future of sight is more options, more things out there for you to either add or subtract to what you're seeing and what you're able to see. One question I did have is you brought up the fact that there are so many different companies and so many different people working to create this future. You have thoughts on like how we're going to sort through all of these different visions of the future, and how are we all going to bring it together? How are we going to cooperate? I mean, this could be as hard as world peace, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why there's a lot of organizations out there, and we reference it in the book, but I mean, I think that the push to sort of an open metaverse is what they call it, is trying to allow multiple companies to be able to work together. So it's not, yet another term, walled gardens. So that's, the term walled garden is literally that of like a company that's like, use our products, use our services, only our platform. There's probably going to be a mix of open experiences and walled gardens, and you need some of each in order to grow. But the idea is you don't want to go out in this future world where everything is augmented and say like, wait a second, I need a change I need this app now, I need that app now, I need like, wait a second, I need this other platform, I need this other pair of wearables, I need like, it all does need to, there needs to be a certain amount of standards in order to allow it to happen. And I think that's out there. I mean, those discussions are starting to happen. I think that it is like the train is moving, like the train is happening. So you are trying to like set the standards while it's all happening. But there are, a lot of people that are doing that and working on it. In the same sense that there are people that are working on trying to set the standards from a more moral and ethical and legal and governmental kind of way. There's not enough of the second, but because it is moving so quickly. But I think that, that's where everybody doesn't know everything. And I think that that's, if you're open to that, or open to going like, I know as much as I know, but I'm going to bring in other experts. I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to do my research enough to get there. Then I think that's the sentiment of those open metaverse groups, is we're figuring out, and it should be sort of where everybody goes. It's not consumer packaged goods, right? It's not the automotive industry specific, like it's not particular industry. This is the sort of shift in the way that we operate. And for those who were around when the internet began, who were around when sort of mobile phones were just launched, it's like, okay, so this next one is like that, like this is coming, but now we have the ability to sort of look into the future a little bit because we've seen it happen at least within our lifetimes, and we can plan and prepare.
Yeah, it really is amazing. And you brought up some great examples, other technology in the past where it's kind of been the wild, wild west when they're first coming on the scene. I know we always talk about the acceleration of technology, but it doesn't seem that government and all those other systems that are meant to keep us whole or keep us on, the right and narrow path, they seem to always be behind.
It's hard to keep up and run the country,
so
right? Or like wrong about it. But I think that there's I wish that there were more and more discussions. There are, organizations that are doing really good work, but I love the World Economic Forum in particular, and sort of the work that they put out there. And it is fun to see sort of friends and colleagues of mine being able to speak on like in Washington and talk to people, but I think that usually when they get like 15 minutes to explain all the impact of all the metaverse. So that's not always necessarily enough. And I'm oversimplifying. I am oversimplifying.
And so I'll plug your book. If you are a policymaker out there and you're trying to get ahead of this thing, Sam's book is a must read. You'll be caught up, and maybe we can coordinate the emerging tech with the policies that need to go along with it.
It's in the book. I mean, that was one of the things that we wanted to cover, which isn't always necessarily covered. We have, the front part of the book tends to be like, here, this is the on-ramp, like get an understanding of what these technologies are, how it could apply. The middle of the book, the chapter 8, covers the over 20 industries, and the back of the book is the majority of it is sort of, policy and impact and government and like all the potential ways that things could maybe go wrong or need to be monitored. And then we have a set of resources also, because we just wanted to be, one-stop shop, or like like sort of a group of all of it in a place that, it isn't something that you would just, read through quickly and put down, but it would be something that you go back to. I know I go back to it. I'm actually preparing for my classes this week, and I'm like, what did we say about this industry? Like, let me go and see, because it was a year's worth of intense work to put it all together.
Yeah, it's truly amazing. So going back to defensive sight, we talk about the fact that you're going to have additions to what you're able to see and subtractions from what you're able to see. How's this going to impact, our senses? Our senses are evolutionary. They've guided us for hundreds of thousands of years to avoid dangers and to enhance our survival. How do you think these new technologies are going to impact our senses, or will the new technologies be adapted and honed to, bring out the best qualities of our senses?
Well, I think that there's probably a little bit of both. I mean, that's where I say that it's like there is the positive and the negative. I mean, the positive being that you'll be able to understand your world better. I mean, even if you think of like the Google apps where you can identify plants, of just like showing the screen and then like, the plant right away. And like that's just sort of, enhances the way that you are with the world. But on the other hand, you can get the I do have to defend all of the advertising industry many times, because I do come from more of a marketing and sales background, and so there is that fear of there will be all these new locations and opportunities for advertising everywhere, and that people are like going to be overwhelmed by that, which I don't think anyone wants. I mean, I think if it does happen, it will be a little bit over time, or it'll be that flip-flopping between platforms, and one platform is advertising based and another one is maybe not. But if we think of the way that, like, we don't want the equivalent of like the endless scroll of social media to happen. Like, you need to sort of build in a certain amount of guardrails potentially for use or overuse. There was, when the new Oculus Quest Pro came out, there was somebody on social media who was like, I can't believe I can only wear it for like 4 hours at a time or something like that. And I was like, I potentially started a fight and went just like, maybe that's okay. Like, maybe not wearing it for more than 4 hours at a time is okay. Like, even if you just like put it down, you charge it for like an hour or whatever it is, and then you put it back on again, like, it's okay. There's, I think that there's going to be the temptation to live within a completely digital world all the time. And that, from a site standpoint, is going to be a little bit too much and overwhelming. And so how to be able to balance that, how to be able to say, like, what are thoughtful choices among them, and to have, companies realize that, of saying, like, walking in going, wait a second, maybe you shouldn't be in VR all day. Maybe you shouldn't wear haptics all day. Like, maybe there's a certain amount of recommended amount of time, or a certain amount of time that's just sort of built in, that you say you do have to, you take this off or go and do something else or whatever it is. I think that I would hope there's a lot of like Gen Z to be like really, sort of grouping an entire generation together, tends to be more thoughtful about this kind of thing than the rest of the generations. And I say this just even having conversation with my students and meeting a lot of sort of, people who are in that, and they just sort of are a little bit of like, well, we shouldn't do this all the time. Like, why are we doing this? This doesn't make sense. Versus Gen X and millennials are sort of like, no, we want to be on social media 24/7. Granted, they're probably in gaming all the time, but that's a whole other thing. But I think that we will be, if we're not already overwhelmed, there will be more of a state of overwhelm. So what I like is that, like, in NVIDIA being one of the companies out there is trying to say, like, how can we use augmented reality to get people outside into the real world? And so it is this sort of different take on what is possible. So yes, it's experience. Yes, this is an augmented experience. Yes, it's, but it's like, be social, go out in the world, try new things, and I think that sort of almost like socially responsible, even though that's probably an overstatement, approach to these technologies, I think is a smart one. And because it's sort of taking care of consumers, taking care of customers. And so I think that if there's that kind of, how can it help and enhance, but also how can we protect and make sure that we're taking care of each other as society, because we're about to be even more digital than we ever were, I think is a good balance.
Yeah, and that reminds me of something you brought up in the book that was just absolutely fascinating to me, was as far as concerns about the future. You talked about, and we always say, the eye is the window to the soul. And I was blown away when I read about how our pupils, how there's so many movements and dilation and different things, that if you can monitor eye movement and the way the eye changes, you can almost, it seemed like you can almost read a person's mind. And that is mind blowing to me, but it's also, you mentioned in the book that it also introduces the potential for abuse. Anyway, elaborate on that a little bit more, because that is absolutely fascinating.
Well, so this is one of the, as you know, as I teaching the class, I sort of find little nuggets here and there that are just sort of fascinating to me. And one was like looking into, okay, with these different headsets, there is eye tracking. And I actually love eye tracking. I think that it really makes us understand and experience, you know, VR and AR in a lot of new and interesting and exciting ways. If you can see, like if the computer that's on your face or whatever can see where you're looking, then it can adapt and change and say, oh, you're interested in this, oh, you're interested in that. Like, but what was in was like how much information you're giving up in order to allow that to happen. I didn't realize until I had done sort of the research on that. And and so if you can think of it as just like a use case example. So like, okay, you're wearing your glasses and then you go and you look at I'll do my best. Like you look at a mug and you go like, okay, I'm looking at the mug and I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. Maybe you're like walking around, you're at a coffee shop or whatever, you look at the mug and that the tracking goes like, oh, she liked that mug. And then you get sent an ad for that mug later. And you're like, that was so creepy. Like, why did I need to know that? Like
That
that
happens a
kind of,
lot.
but I think that happens a little bit when you go like the Siri and Alexa listening in on what
Yeah.
you're doing, and then you get served an ad. Now it's going to be sort of watching what you're doing and get served an ad. And it might not be that somebody has done it, but it might be just like automatic. And so it's not only that kind of looking at what you're doing, but if you're like your pupils dilate, you're going to be able to understand that you're more interested in that or a person or whatever it might be, and you're sort of giving away that kind of information. There's this like crazy chart of all the different kinds of sentiments that you get just from your eyes, but I think that those are a couple that you go, wait a second, maybe I shouldn't have hit that toggle to say, yeah, do the eye tracking because it makes it easy. It's a little bit like when you say, sure, you can have all like my data for information and then I can get served ads and that's okay. There's a little bit of we're going to have to make the decision about our bodies and what we want technology to monitor and whether we're okay with that and where each of us sort of individually stand on that kind of information. Now people are like, well, do you still have an Alexa? I'm like, yes, I still have an Alexa. Like I still have it. Do we use it that often? No. And will I still toggle? Yes, I did. But at least I'm doing it from a standpoint of, okay, I am allowing this to happen because I want this, but I'm giving up this. And I think that with social media is that we didn't realize how much we were giving up. And so there is going to be a certain point in time where maybe, you're going to say, I don't want to give that up. Like I want to, and perhaps you're going to have to pay to give up a certain amount of, well, I do want the eye tracking, but I don't want it monitored all the time. And we're like, well, that's at whatever tier of payment per month, so that you don't have, if you look at the mug in the coffee shop, that you're not going to get the ad, because we do as a company need to sort of make sure that we're able to keep your technology improving and those kinds of things. I mean, that's based on what's already happening, but it is, it seems like entirely logical that that's what's coming next.
Yeah, it is so fascinating. There's so many things to talk about. Of course, this podcast is dedicated to the sense of sight, but Internet of Senses Institute is looking at all 5 senses. So I did want to just kind of close on giving you an opportunity. These technologies right now are primarily focused on the sense of sight, but there's a lot of research being done on the other senses, and I just wanted to give my other senses an opportunity to be heard here.
Yeah, no, there's a lot. I mean, I think that the sense of hearing is inherent to a lot of this. When all these technologies were new, it was mainly like a lot of it was done in sort of stereo, which doesn't really, that's not how we listen to the world. It's not in stereo. And so there's, spatial sound is sort of built into all of this, so that when you're especially if you're in a virtual world, that there is that sort of dynamic of, well, the sound is coming over from this direction, it's near or far, whatever is, and all of those technologies are sort of at this point just inherently attached to the eyes, the sort of eyes and ears. HaptX, I love HaptX, honestly, especially when it's really good, of which there are a couple companies that are really, really good, because it the feedback, especially in sort of a virtual situation, can be you know can be at sort of sub-millimeter precision if it's really good. And so if you're doing that design of a car and you want to feel the texture of the seats or whatever while you're designing it, or you're planning and you're in aerospace and you need to practice so that you can understand where the different buttons are, that you're able to do that with sort of that haptic feedback in a true way for training or design, or multiple areas. I There are a couple of smell technologies that I personally am dying to try. That there's one that came out, I think they had a booth or something at CES, and have sort of told me that it's going to be like multiple times more advanced soon. And yes, I've sort of begged that I please want to work with them so I can explain what they do in more detail. But I think that understanding how smell fits in, I mean, smell's been involved in certain ways, like the location-based experiences for virtual reality have used smell in a sort of broad sense of like, oh, this odor is coming from this area. But I think that this idea of making it personalized and specific and something that is more of a wearable, I think that's the fascinating thing that I want to explore more about the potential. I mean, proprioception is a whole other thing, which ends up happening just with all these different senses, and especially in VR. I don't know if I missed any. We've gotten sight, sound, hearing, taste. There is a company that's trying to do it. I don't know. I mean, I think that smell is so much of a part of what's possible, and that I think we're gonna, as an emerging, if I can speak for all of the emerging tech industry, of which I cannot really, but if I pretend that let's conquer smell first, like we've put eyes, ears, like touch, smell, and then sort of taste. That's sort of, I think, from a technology standpoint, the order in which things are coming and advancing.
Yeah, that's really amazing. Good overview of all the senses. Samantha G. Wolfe, everyone. The book is Metaverse, See Beyond the Hype. Some must have. Everybody, this is our future. You need this on your desk as a reference guide. It will break down all the different movement parts that are occurring right now with this amazing technology. Sam, any last thoughts before we wrap up?
No, this has been really fun. I like to talk about the senses, so it's great to
Yes,
be
that's
able
why
to
you're one
chat
of
about.
our most valued members of the community. So on behalf of everybody, we really really appreciate you a great deal, and so thankful for all the time that you're able to give us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.